In 1957, Gibson manufactured the first prototype of the Flying V guitar, together with the Explorer and the modern models. The production was made of Corina wood, which was a trademark name for limba wood, similar to but lighter than mahogany. The Flying V, along with the Futura, the Explorer, and the Modern, made up a line of modernists' guitars. The Flying V was designed by Gibson's president of that time, Ted McCarthy, and the inventor of the humbucker, Seth Lover, who contributed to the design as a way to lean the guitar against a wall without it tipping over. These designs were meant to add a more futuristic aspect to Gibson's image. But after the initial launch in 1958 to 1959, Gibson stopped the production simply because the guitar didn't sell.
If you look at the designs from the 50s, or whatever people thought about in the 50s, the guitars in terms of shapes and colors, also the times also reflected on the cars. The Explorer shape and then the fins in the big like Cadillac cars, American cars, it's all like same thinking in terms of design. And then you look at the pastel colors, especially Fender came up with in the early 60s. You had the Daphne blue, and you had the, a turquoise kind of color. You had the pink, salmon pink. You had all the creamy pastel colors, same on the cars.
They all looked like they were rockets that were about to take off, They would glide in and out of parking lots. And
it was the same thinking of the American designers at the time, and nobody knew. It seemed to be so futuristic then. They are classic designs today.
It was definitely something that was unique and something that was futuristic. It was more the future.
Everything in America seemed Technicolor. It was very, very optimistic place. A lot of energy, a lot of forward movement. And it made sense, really, that the music, rock and roll, and also the instruments kind of mirrored that. That's what I think was in Ted's mind when he came up with those shapes. Then they went almost too far with the Flying V, because it was like, it hasn't got any curves. The Fender was all curves. The V was like stabbing into the future.
It was kind of crazy, kind of out there.
Yeah.
That and the Explorer that were space age designs, and it's interesting how a guitar can become an iconic shape. It has a lot to do with the artists that play it. If it's accepted into the musician world, then it tends to become iconic. And in the metal world, everyone knows Flying V, everyone knows Explorers.
As much as it was what could be described as the bastard son, when it first appeared, only for the select brave few that wanted to take it on, contemporary architecture or, modern art, and, but it is kind of the future.
When Gibson did the Flying V way back in 1958, it was hard for them to sell these 98 copies. So at the end of it, they had to use something just as a sign for the guitar shops. And to imagine the price of these guitars today, these 98 guitars, it makes me shake. But they couldn't sell them.
Nobody wanted the Flying V in those days. It wasn't a rock guitar.
Blues rock artist Lonnie Mack and blues legend Albert King started using the Flying V almost immediately. Mack used his 1958 Flying V exclusively during his career. Albert King used his 1958 V into the mid-70s and later replaced it with a variety of custom Vs. Later in the mid-60s, such guitarists as Dave Davies and Andy Powell also started using the Flying V because of the distinctive look and powerful sound. The renewed interest created a demand for Gibson to reissue the model once again.
I was never looking for the V. The V was coming to me. It's all based on circumstances, and in fact, what I loved was Les Paul. I loved to play Les Paul. If you look at the first Scorpions album, Lonesome Crow, which was our first album together with Klaus Meine and Rudolf and so on, I think there is a picture maybe inside, like a live picture, where Rudolf has the V and I have the blonde hair with the Les Paul. That was the first V that actually I came in touch with. And so a couple of times, based on circumstances, once I locked my guitar, my Les Paul, in a locker. I was auditioning for a band called Frampi, Inga Rumpf. There was a very famous band in Germany at the time. And then a second time, we played actually in Saarstedt, I remember, I think, that I broke a string and a lead break was coming up and Rudolf had to give me his guitar. So based on circumstances with that guitar that was matching really well with the sound that I had in my vision, both times I plugged it into my amp. It sounded something very close to what I wanted. And so I said to Rudolf, you know, I think I should have that guitar. And so I bought it off him.
Just the fact that they were different. You know, back in those days, everybody played a Strat or a Les Paul, and those were pretty much the only guitars available. And to me, a Flying V looked different, and it just looked cool. I liked it from the very beginning because it was so different. It was really like almost like futuristic looking, and yeah. So I was immediately attracted to the shape and the design of it. You know, because it looked to me like a stage guitar. This is something like a showman guitar. It's different. Just it stood out. You know, not everybody had a V. They were actually quite rare back then, believe it or not.
I remember getting my first V in '93, and it was a Gibson Flying V, white, and yeah, I was very excited to play that shape. But I didn't know how to play it. Like, I'd pick one up, like, if I saw one in a shop or something, I'd play it like this. And then he said, you can't sit down. It's just horrible to play. But actually, it's the ultimate guitar to sit down and practice on, because you have it like this, and you have this kind of angle. It's almost like a classical guitar angle, right? So, yeah, '93, I got my first V.
When I was first starting out, all the cool players had Flying Vs, you know. That was just something I dreamed of having, a Flying V one day, and I bought, you know, the second guitar, or the third guitar actually that I ever owned was a Flying V. Not white, but I made it white, and it wasn't a Gibson either, so I got a little Gibson thing, put it on there. Yeah, the second V I had, the second guitar, the backup I had, was even more of a copy. It was so thin, super thin, and only had one pickup. It was black. But the Flying V shape, it just fit well. You could sit down and play it easily, you know, put it right here between your legs and jam. And standing up, you know, sometimes a little unbalanced. It just looked like it was moving. It looked like, you know, it's going somewhere.
I was extremely lucky to come across the guitar second-hand in a shop in the middle of Birmingham. Just so happened to spot the guitar. Even then, it was expensive at £500. But immediately, I thought to myself, I really do need this guitar. And that was obviously I would say it's my flagship guitar.
I was living in London and we were looking for new amplifiers. And at that time, Cliff Cooper, the owner, started this store. And in the course of trying out these orange amplifiers, which I was very impressed with, on the wall was a Gibson Flying V. Actually, there were two. picked this thing up, and it was brand new, but it actually was 4 or 5 years old already, but it was just straight out of the packing case. The thing sounded great even before I plugged it into the amplifier. And I bought it right there and then. It's 300 quid. And then it became a love affair, and I bonded with the guitar.
In 1967, Gibson reissued the guitar in mahogany and updated the design with a bigger pickguard and replaced the original bridge, which had the strings inserted through the back. Some models were also shipped with a short Vibrola Maestro tremolo. The design of the V places the pickups near the center of the mass of the entire guitar, which enhances the sustain. This 1967 model is now the standard for the Flying V.
I think it was around 1976. A friend of mine bought the V, and he wasn't happy about the size of it, so he decided to sell it, and I didn't have much money, and it was my biggest dream to have the Flying V. So I got a good offer, and bought my first V then. There weren't that many Flying V guitarists, so you were kind of different when you played the Flying V. But way back then, it was quite rare to see Flying V guitarists, And like I said, it grabbed my attention when I saw a guitarist play Flying V. I had to check him out.
I switched over to a Flying V from the BC Rich Bitch because the guitar, the Rich Bitch just didn't play good, and looked beautiful. It was really amazing, but it didn't play good. Broke strings all the time, and I was just taking off in my career at the time, and I didn't have the time to tolerate this shit. So I remember the flannel straw. We were in a place called the Boathouse in Norfolk, Virginia. First song, and I had changed all my strings that day on that guitar. And first song broke 2 strings. And that's it. I'm done with you. And I got rid of the BC Rich and went to Jackson. And I told him, I said, I want one of your King V's, but I want 24 frets. No one's had a 24 fret Flying V prior to me. So I like getting way up there. Second octave, getting around there, that area, when you're soloing. And can you make one? So they had to reconfigure their neck to make the specs so that it was for 24 fret. Somebody offered me a lot of money for it, and I just was like, what's money? This is history. This is a guitar that did rest in peace, for God's sakes, man. We're not going to be partying out this guitar.
I kind of created my own, because when I went to I was already with BC Rich, but I suggested to them that they make Flying V's because I liked BC Rich's. They had the longer scale, they got 24 frets. They had all the electronics that were hot. Gibson Les Pauls are nice guitars. Fender Strats are nice guitars, but I knew I didn't want to play those because everybody played them. Even though, looking back, you think Michael Schenker, you think KK Downing, and that's all the Gibson Flying V, which started all that stuff. But then the different companies started making them, and they started making them more pointy, like I always felt they should be. I went to the owner, Bernie Rico, and I said, why don't you guys make a Flying V? Because I'll play it. And I still have the second one they ever made. First one went to one of his sons. But other than that, I've got the second one.
So I went all the way to London. In Denmark Street, I found this wine red Flying V made in Japan at that time, of course. Bought it, brought it back home, and dressed up in leather, 2 flying V's and all that. That was, the perfect look. We were forming the band Mercyful Fate in March 1981. And I continued with that Japanese flying V. Then we were invited with Mercyful Fate in May 1982 to go and record 2 tracks for this UK-based record label called Ebony Records. Ended up in London as the first stop, went to a guitar shop. I instantly fell in love with a flying V that was blue, and it had a merged Gibson Explorer fretboard and head. So I said, wow, that damn looks good, I like that, tilted head. And I took that guitar into the van, drove up to Hull in mid-UK, and did all the recordings for Black Funeral and Walking Back to Hell. That was the 2 songs we recorded, Dangerous Meeting later. The strings were, a centimeter or, over the fretboard, so I really had a struggle to execute the songs, but I just wanted to record with that guitar.
That's one of the first guitars I ever played on, when I was like, I started out with the Les Paul when I was like 13, 14 years old. But when I was, 14, something like that, I started with the Flying V. It's a very unique guitar that simply sticks out, And then, of course, a little later, when I listened to and saw Michael Schenker, that was just a very big influence on me. And I know that a lot of other guitarists in the area where I'm from, in Gothenburg, they also played the Flying V's, especially white Flying V's.
Initially, when you see a V, the impact of the shape is special. It's not a curvy, traditional shape of guitar. There's nothing really like it. I mean, it looks like a spaceship. The first time I actually saw a Flying V was the most un-heavy metal thing you can ever imagine. It was on the 7-inch single of Shalimar. I don't know if you remember Shalimar. It was a band from the late 70s, early 80s. And on the front of the 7-inch single, one of the guys had, I think it was a Dean. It was a Dean V. And I remember seeing it thinking, what the hell is that thing?
This was the one that I did the first Sabbath record with, and this is the one that I got when I was 15. It's a 1979 Gibson. Because when you're a kid, you don't even think about keeping the value of a guitar. I had a Kayla put on it, had the headstock broken off it because it got packed away wrong. Well, when I found it in my lockup, it was sprayed black with car spray. The neck was sanded down on the back, probably from a mad night somewhere, thinking I could, oh, it's too thick, this neck. But that was my first one, and the main reason for that was seeing Wolf Hoffman on the front of Kerrang magazine back in the day, on the railway tracks in Solingen when I think they'd just done Balls to the Wall, and he was there with the Flying V, and I was like, oh, that's so cool.
And at first I thought it's a bit strange because, of course, it sits a bit. You don't know whether to put it there or there. But I thought, oh, it'll be all right. I'll get used to it. It became my thing, I mean, it's a very good-looking guitar. And it does a lot of work on stage. I think it looks great. And in most photographs, I think the V would really stand out. And a white Flying V, is pretty special.
In the 70s, the V guitar became the trademark for many of the rock scene's greatest artists. The guitar became a legendary symbol for the early metal and progressive music scenes all over Europe and the US. The V guitar became popular due to its aggressive appearance and were used by artists like Andy Powell, Jimi Hendrix, Johnny Winter, Michael Schenker, K.K. Downing, and Brian Tatler.
The end of the 70s, I designed the Gibson V black and white, and then that started becoming my trademark. And I had a black and a white, and you know, and I wonder which one shall I play today? They both sounded good, you know. And in the end, I just said, you know, I'm just gonna paint the guitar black and white, you know. I mean, this was the way how it came about. But I think there's more than meets the eye. Also indicated the second chapter of my life, the black and white V, you know.
Well, they asked me, what finish would you like? What's some of the things you've never seen on a guitar, or what's the widest thing you can think of? I said, you know, I really would like it to look like a World War II bomber. Yeah. You know, like those riveted aluminum type bombers that had the decals in the ladies, and I sent him some artwork, and this is kind of the look I have in mind. And when I got the guitar back, I was blown away because they made it look so realistic and so cool and so different. I'm really loving it.
I think it's all of the above. It's the synergy. If it, as a design, because it's a visual design, it's almost like somebody drew it out on paper and then hoped that it would sound good. Not always the case. You come up with something in your head. But because of the amount of wood in the body, it does sound very good. It's a very vibrant guitar.
It's one of my newer ones. It's a matte black with the tribal as gloss. So it's real striking. One of my favorite ones over the years, it's got like a fire background, and it's got the tribal design on top of it. The tribal's, you know, linked to me. It's like branded to me. So I just try to think of different ways, you know, to do backgrounds, different ways to present the tribal. You know, I just try to keep them thinking. You know, there's like 2 or 3 main styles, and I try to think of whatever ways I can make paint jobs on them. Like when I first got them, it was like a black background with silver tribal, and then it evolved into like a marble background with whatever color tribal I could think of that looked good on it. And then we went to fire background, which is one of my favorites, and then the newest one, like I said, is a matte black background.
Well, color doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean anything at all. Stuff like fret, inlay, binding, all that kind of stuff, it's aesthetic. It looks. You can't hear how it looks, right? So you want to get a guitar that plays great and sounds great. And then if you can accomplish those 2 things, then if it looks good, that's just icing on the cake. So what we try and do is make sure that the guitar is the same, whether it's an import or it's an American model. Everything's measured with a micrometer.
Instead of working with what you've actually got, like I did with my first Flying V, you know, I loved it, and I loved it so much that I worked with it. As time goes on, you can rectify all of those things, and that's what I did with my own individual designs. In the metal world, it's usually pretty pointed and more aggressive, and in actual fact, my guitars became probably more that way over the years, more pointed, you know, just a bit more aggressive looking.
Here in the background you have like an arch enemy symbol, which we've had since the beginning of the band. It's kind of in there somewhere, and then it's got the blood, kind of dried up blood splatter. Then I've had another one like this one, with a more of a skull design, also red, black and white. Red, black and white are my favorite colors, I guess. But yeah, like I said, maple necks, ebony fretboards, and these are my inlays that we came up with. But it's got to be thick enough so that it can have tone as well. So it's a balance there, because if you have the too thin necks, you don't have such a good sound. I don't want it to be too difficult to play guitar. I want it to be easy, because I want to be able to express myself. I don't want to fight with the guitar.
When I got approached by Dean himself in Chicago, he asked me, try this guitar, and I played it, and I went like, this is what I want. We put together quite a few designs, and that was always based on either they had an idea and then asked me what I think, so we would always be teamwork thing. But then, of course, I had another idea for a hollow body guitar, and I asked him to build me that. Then I had another one for a black and red guitar. I had a vision of a chrome guitar, and I asked Elliot if he can make that reality. And also the other one that got stolen, the color guitar, kaleidoscope guitar, was one of my favorites. One of the Strangers in the Night guitars with all the faces on it, and then one of the Yin and Yang. They built me a couple of guitars straight away because I think we just put the Yin and Yang on the market. I needed one because, you know, I was promoting that guitar.
In the 80s and 90s, the V guitar was crafted by new companies such as ESP, Dean, BC Rich, Jackson, Ibanez, Framus, and many more. This was appealing to the heavy metal scene, and the V guitar was reborn once again and used by artists like James Hetfield, Kerry King, Michael Denner, Hank Sherman, Michael Amott, Dave Mustaine, and Wolf Hoffman. Bands like Judas Priest, Slayer, The Scorpions, Megadeth, Accept, Diamond Head, Metallica, and Mercyful Fate, among many others, became the flag bearers for the Flying V.
Yes, I mean, over the years, the original PAFs had a very low output. Like an old, like I have a 58 and a 59 Les Paul, they have something like 7.5, 7.8K. Those can have up to 15 or even 22 today. They're hot wired. When they were invented or like published, nobody really needed that. You know, it was like, humbucking only because, you know, the name says it already. It cuts out the humming. But back then, maybe in the TV studio, you know, some bad wiring, and then the guitar started to hum. But nobody really had a high gain in his amp then. That came later. And only like if you have a single coil and a high gain amp, then you're in trouble. And you need something that, you know, bucks the hum. That's why we have a humbucker. There were days in the early 80s, everybody changed pickups, just to change pickups. Because a few pickup companies were like DiMarzio and Seymour Duncan and all those, Mighty Might, they're coming up, and people took the Gibson pickups out and put those replacement parts in. I did the same. After a while, I threw them all out because it fit well with the original pickup. So, but those were the experimental days in the early 80s.
In the beginning, when I played the Flying V, it was Japanese, cheap Flying Vs, you know. So sometimes I put in a DiMarzio pickup, for instance, to give it a bit more beef. But nowadays, when I play the regular Gibson Flying V, I prefer to play with the original pickups, to be closer to the sound that my heroes had, like Leslie West, Johnny Winter, Michael Schenker, Andy Powell, Wishbone Ash. Their sound, it's nice to be able to sound-wise get closer and then give it my own signature as a player, you know. But like the basic sound of the guitar, keep it close to the old heroes, you know. That's important for me.
I have two pickup lines. I have live wires, which are active pickups, and I have another line that are passive pickups that are called a thrash factor. And those are replicas of the pickups from my Jackson, the one I recorded Rust in Peace with. So anybody who wants a guitar that sounds like the Jackson Rust in Peace guitar, the new Seymour Duncan thrash factor pickups are the pickups that I used. Exactly. They took them apart, reversed engineered them, and then put them back together again, and that's how they came up with the thrash factor.
I was an EMG player for years and years and years, and recently I discovered those Fishman Fluids pickups. They're also active, and yeah, they work great. And they actually wired them to my specifications. I went to Fishman and we tweaked them. It's actually quite cool. These are really revolutionary pickups. They work really well. Yeah, like I said, the frets are stainless steel. I really prefer stainless steel because they last forever. Because I play really hard, and I discovered even sometimes after a few months, I see the first dips, and never been happier. Because honestly, this is the first signature guitar that actually turned out the way that I wanted it to.
Year 2009, I was offered by a US guitar company in Colorado called 1032 Guitars to have a custom-made Flying V, and say, yeah, sure, I'm onto it, and we exchanged ideas forth and back and the design and all that. So the interesting thing for me was that now I had a chance to go back to the blue Flying V I bought in London in May 1982 with the Explore head and merged with the Flying V body. And we have an Ibanez ZR whammy system. Normally I don't use that too much, but for recordings I have always done, early Mercyful Fate. I did a lot of Stratocaster, whammies there. This one is locked, so it stays better in tune. Other interesting thing that, I wanted more than 22 frets, so we extended it all the way up to 27. So there's 27 frets here. The neck profile is more like an Ibanez type of flatter one. And on the back we have compartments for the whammy handle. Everything is made from magnets, so you don't have to have a screwdriver, you just lift it up. So this is like how it looks on the back, and now I'm getting a new one built on these ideas here. This has extra jumper fret. Yeah, like again, precision is better, especially with the flat neck profile. That makes if you really play fast, you get that little 10% more accuracy than maybe a Strat, but so it's I can choose between different styles and stuff. This is a JB Seymour Duncan, and it's really good for pure heavy metal, and I can detune it all the way down to B, which I've done quite a lot, different band combinations.
Well, they're just basically very high output, I guess, but they're also very natural sounding. They're passive pickups. Just maybe because all the guys that I like don't use active pickups, so that's why I like real tube amps, like older Marshalls and stuff like that. But I mean, we nailed it pretty quickly. I gave them a pickup that I really liked, that I had in an old guitar that I really enjoyed, and they based it on that, and then after a few tweaks it was there. So.
Yeah, I still use a whammy, and exclusively it's the vibrola. Yeah, which is just basically a bent piece of spring steel, and it pulls the strings back or forward. I'm not using extreme dive bombing or anything technique. It's really more of a vibrato.
Yeah, I've been with ESP a few years now, actually. This is one that they built for me. Mahogany body. It's got a piece of maple running all the way through it, so you can see it's got mahogany wings on it. Ebony fretboard, titanium Floyd on it. I've just put the Fishman Fluence pickups in because I'm doing some work with those guys at the moment, and they're really impressed with these. It's got the rechargeable battery on the back, which is the backpack there, so I'm not bothering with the usual 9-volt in there, just USB into that, which is great. Locking tuners on it, glow-in-the-dark markers, because I'm blind as a bat on stage. That helps.
All right, this is a Gibson 1978 Flying V, and this is one of my favorite guitars. It will never go out on tour because it's too precious to me. And the funny thing with this one is that most of my musician friends, guitarists, actually own this guitar. And there was a guy over in Gothenburg who bought this back in 1978 when it was brand new. And then he sold it to another friend of mine, who sold it to another friend of mine. So I've been following this guitar for quite a while, actually. And it got, kind of worn out because, they changed pickups, they did something to it, and I think the headstock's been broken a few times, actually, So the last guy who had it before me, he called me one day because I told him a long time ago that if you ever sell this guitar, please let me know. It doesn't matter the shape or the condition, And after a few years, he called me, well, I'm thinking of selling that guitar, so are you interested in buying it? And I got it real cheap, so I couldn't say no.
The Epiphone is pretty much an exact copy of the original guitar. It's got the bound body, neck, headstock, the pearl block inlays on an ebony fretboard, the Floyd Rose, the EMGs. It's got one volume knob, and there's a selector switch for the pickups. You've got a battery compartment in the back there, which this one, I don't think this one has. This one, as you can see here, I wear a big fat thumb ring, and it scratches the paint off. Now, if you're gonna, you spend your hard-earned money on a guitar, you don't want to. Well, some people do. Some people get the relics these days, but you might not want a neck that looks like it's been used. So we wanted to recreate the feel of a neck that had some paint off it, and the master builder suggested a satin neck. It's a pretty simple machine, but it's a beast. It's mainly because I've used the Floyd more often throughout the years. It was just something that I was used to, I liked the feel of, and it was the first choice when putting together a guitar with a locking trem on it, really. And obviously, with the legacy of Priest and KK Downing, there's a lot of tremolo arm use or whammy bar use, whatever you want to call it. And it works really well, and that's why it became a Floyd and not anything else, really.
On my V, it's the standard pickups that I've always had. I did try replacing them with an EMG, but I didn't like it, and I went back to the original pickup because it just had more sound, more tone somehow.
Like I say, jumping years and years ahead, obviously my new guitars with the Floyd Rose with a speed loader system. I've played a whole Judas Priest set with one guitar without tuning the guitar. And you know how ferocious I am with the whammy bar. It's insane, But I've played a whole set on several occasions without tuning the instrument.
Basically, and to me, a standard V was always like a plank, because it is a plank. It's just a board cut to a V and then a neck put on, but it doesn't have any contour. So that frame is V. We tried to do something where we took some of the features of a Strat and build it into the V. So it's got a nice rounded body. It has a tremolo system, which is very important. It has a long scale of the Fender Strat. So a lot of features of a Strat are in that V. It just looks from a distance, it looks just like a great V, but the closer you come, the more Strat features you will discover. So to me, it's the best of both worlds.
Been using the Edwards Vs, which is, like I say, it's part of the ESP brand, the one that I got from Japan on eBay, actually. But I wanted one with the Evertune on because these things, I started using them and they're so good. They're so good, for live. You can really hit the guitar hard. That E string doesn't go sharp. It's like a stabilizer for your tuning, really. I really like the neck profile on this as well. It just sort of fits my hand really well. When you find a guitar that just works for you. So this has been sort of the main one I've been using live the past year or so. Again, I've put the Fishmans in this. Got the Alnico in the bridge actually rather than ceramic, because it's just got a bit more of the old T500 squelch to it.
I've had so many Flying V's broken. I had a 59 once. A road manager ran across the stage, got caught in a curly lead and pulled the guitar over, headstock broke. That weak spot with the angle of the headstock as opposed to the neck and the very long headstock, I would sometimes put the heavy Grover machine heads on, which was too much for that. And, you know, the 60s Vs are very thin. That joint where the headstock goes back at the top of the fingerboard, I mean, that's a very small piece of wood, and then you've got a truss rod in there.
My Flying V broke several times because I can remember there was a time I didn't have a stand for it, so I would just stand it up against the wall or a cab, and it would slip, and of course it hit the neck would hit the floor and crack at the top of the neck by the nut. So I had to have it repaired a few times.
So why did this legendary guitar become a trademark for so many of the music scene's greatest artists today? What is the story behind it? Just why would a futuristic guitar that was ahead of its time, produced back in 1958, that was withdrawn after a couple of years, suddenly become one of the most popular and iconic rock guitars in the world today?
When you play the Flying V, you've got to own it. You know, you got to look right with that guitar. You got to have the right attitude to play.
To put that thing on, you've got to have balls to play something that looks as ridiculous as that, really. You know, so you've got to go with it. It's all or nothing.
He's absolutely right. You've got to back it up somehow, yeah, which is a great thing.
It's a rock star guitar, I would say, for the posing rock star. But it's a beautiful instrument. It's well laid out, it's well balanced, and it sounds great. I know it. I've been surrounded by Flying Vs. They sound great.
You're not sat at the back with a Flying V. You're making a statement with it.
I kind of had that illusion a little bit myself, you know. You hear Jimmy Page play guitar or Jeff Beck, you think it's the guitar more than the person. Oh, if I get that instrument, I'm going to be playing. No, you're not. You know, but you can accomplish that because you hear it from that person playing it with that guitar. So if, for instance, the Flying V would have been played by 50 wannabes in the last 40 years, the Flying V would have been a wannabe guitar, not a respected guitar. The guitar becomes who is playing it. What's, you know, the person behind the guitar makes it the guitar. Jimi Hendrix played it, Johnny Winter played it, Andy Powell played it, Leslie West played it. They're all great guitarists, so they created respect for that guitar, you know, and I did too.
There's no better feeling for me than having a really fat, crunchy guitar sound behind me. And it's speaking for me, through me. That is probably the biggest inspiration of all things. Yeah. A great guitar sound. I could write 20 riffs if I have a great guitar sound like that. And I'm not boasting whatsoever. That's what does it. It's not me. I'm just a messenger. Things come through that don't normally. Or on stage, you're in front of all these people, and yes, there's a part of me that wants everyone to like me. I'm a people pleaser. I also acknowledge that the music makes us do things that are different on the stage. It's like when you're in the Olympics. You don't know what it's like until you get there. You practice, practice, practice. Then when you get there, whew, you've got such adrenaline and such energy from everyone and everything around you, and it's flowing through you. It's a wonderful feeling.
The driving force is it's got to have emotion. Well, you know, I think I got that from the blues, and you know, my solos always had to have a meaning. There was no point in soloing. And I think an audience knows when you're emoting and when you're connecting with, especially solo work, you know. So, you know, that was what I would always look for in my playing.
Sometimes, you know, a Strat can be a little bit better. It can be a bit more controlled. Sometimes you need the thickness of a Les Paul in the studio. I mean, ask Wolf about Balls to the Wall. What guitar he used for that?
So a lot of people always thought like Balls to the Wall was played with that V that I had for years, but it wasn't, you know. It was a Strat.
You know, Scorpions for me was a pretty major influence in the early days of metal for me, you know, because in America, you know, we had Ted Nugent, you know, we had Aerosmith, that was some of the harder edge stuff. I know there were other bands that were as hard, but you know, when I first discovered some of the stuff from Europe, you know, Judas Priest, Scorpions, they were probably the biggest of the bands in Europe that made it to the States.
Yeah.
And they were all playing Flying V's, you know.
Yeah.
Remember looking at, you know, the Tokyo tapes and seeing Flying V, you know, Rudy Schenker, Michael Schenker.
Without a doubt, Hendrix was the main one, my sole inspiration. The first time I saw him, I think in '67, something like that, touring the UK. Everything that Hendrix did had elements of the future in it. It was the first time I experienced with my ears something that sounded, that I could identify as heavy metal today.
You know, the reason why I got into playing the guitar, no doubt it was Ace Frehley of Kiss. I was a huge Kiss fan and started in 75, 76, so I started with, you know, the first album, the second, Hotter Than Hell, Dressed to Kill, and then the live album.
I was probably Fleetwood Mac's biggest fan. I mean, I saw their first gig as Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac. And Peter Green just would, he had this magical ability to move you with his guitar playing. To tears, actually.
My focus was the art of lead guitar with pure self-expression. That kind of a combination, a great guitarist and a great singer, taking part, taking over, you know. You start off with a riff, you have the singer introducing the song, you get everybody behind it. And then, you know, after a while, you know, when the time is right, you drift into an adventure of a solo. Take people to another place, and then let the singer take over again and bring it back to where it started. And for me, that's rock and roll, you know. What can be done with one single string is so incredible, especially with the distortion of a guitar.
People out there watching and listening guitar players who date back will remember, you know, if you broke a string, you had to stop the show, replace the string and do all of that. It had to be in the early days. It was the only guitar I had. It had to be, you know. And then when the day came when I actually got a second guitar, well, that was just like, it was just a dream come true.
I have my favorite one, the one I call my number one, which is still at my house. Yeah, I had two of them that were identical, and I had them painted with Mercedes silver paint. So that's why I know that that's the guitar. Plus, I have a little sticker that I put on the top of it, and I put a piece of Scotch tape over it. It says you have spiritual powers, you should choose to practice them. And it's been on there so long that the tape turned yellow. So, yeah, that's my baby.
My 67V didn't come with a case, so I had a violin-style case made by a violin maker, and it was really exactly in the shape of the Flying V. This is a good story, actually. But made in that traditional way with steamed plywood and then covered in leather. I think it's a beautiful case. And extremely light, and inside crushed velvet. And that guitar would travel everywhere. In those days, there was no security at airports. You could put the guitar in the. I put it in the closet in the plane. And I was down in the South Georgia or somewhere, Karen, and I remember going through security one time. And of course, this thing would look bizarre because it was in the shape. I wish I still had the case. It was the shape of the guitar. So people go, this guy at security, big black guy, he said to me, "Hey, what you got in there, son?" I went, "Guitar." He says, "Hey, it looks like a snake catcher to me." And that was, you know, he had no idea. People would see this thing with a handle. It's a snake catcher. To him, it was a snake catcher.
On the 12th fret marker here, there's a graphic of a falcon, and the falcon name came about. When I joined the band, Rob Halford picked up on my surname, which is Faulkner, and originally it was Falconer, and it came from back in the day my family trained, kept, and flew falcons for dignitaries and royalty and stuff like that. So that's where the name comes from, and Rob said he's got to be called the Falcon because of that, and it kind of stuck. Although we don't fly Falcons anymore, we fly V's. How about that?
When I met Hank Sherman before we did the Bratz 1980, and of course before we did the Mercyful Fate albums, Melissa and Don't Break the Oath and so on, I noticed that he was also a Flying V guitarist. So that made it quite special, way back in 1980 when we did the Bratz album. We could use the two Flying V's as a signature. He had a white one, and I have a darker one. So when we did that album, we had a solo key with small Flying V's, so you could see which guy played what solo on the album, and that was quite cool. We continue to do that trademark on the Mercyful Fate period, So we might have been the first Flying V team.
There is a story. I've since run into Michael Schenker a few times over the years. And Michael actually made the journey up, I believe, from, I think UFO played in Birmingham, I think on the Sunday. But I think that Michael saw the guitar in the shop, I think something like that. They were playing Birmingham Odeon, I think. And but he came up a couple of days later, with the intention of acquiring the guitar. But I'd been in there, and every time I see Michael, he always goes, KK, you have my guitar.
Yes, it's a very special, simple shape, very fleshy. It's right into your face, and that's why it looks good for the rock star, the posing rock star.
From what at first seemed like an odd experiment, the Flying V guitar flourished, gaining massive popularity as time went on. This bastard son of guitars became an iconic symbol for the selected bold and brave rock guitar heroes who chose to wield it. Although it has a simple shape, it's also very flashy in its look. It became the perfect guitar for rock stars who knew how to use it and show it off. Its popularity rose along with those few successful stars whose careers have led them into rock royalty status. As their popularity grew, so did the popularity of the Flying V guitar, as they played with it every night on rock and roll's biggest stages. Its iconic shape and image would be on the cover of every rock magazine and in every music video as well. There's always been a special connection between the musician and the Flying V. It was not only their guitar, but their companion, their partner in crime, their weapon of choice. What was once considered a futuristic shape now is considered a classic look by today's standards. So what does the future hold for the Flying V? Only the gods of rock truly know.
You think your band has problems? Every band has problems. We all have problems. Now, I would say it's not how big your pencil is, it's how you write your name, but that's me.
Michael Denner telling me, you can play lead. It's like, no, don't tell them. I don't want that. Singing and playing rhythm, that's enough to do. I don't want to do solos too.
It's a very fleshy looking guitar. I mean, it had the nickname Flying Arrow. Would you open the window, please? You shoot it up to the moon, you throw it around, it flies very well. Short distance, though.
But I like the neck to be maple. It's a harder wood. That's that didn't sound right. It looks like it's going to take off into the stratosphere.
Man, I'm going to go say hello to Slash and meet Slash, be cool. And just before I did it, Slash comes up to me and says, "Hey, Kerry, how you been?" I went, "Fuck, when did I meet Slash?"
I just remember that I had this project to build something out of wood in the school. I was 14 years old. And what I decided to build was a guitar. And guess what shape it was? It was a triangle.
And to imagine the price of these guitars today, these 98 guitars, you know, it makes me shake. But they couldn't sell them.
Rob said he's got to be called the Falcon because of that. It's kind of cool because it's part of the heritage of the family name and everything like that. So although we don't fly Falcons anymore, we fly Vs. How about that? That's corny as shit, but yeah.
What should be your legacy as a musician and a guitar?
Well, how do you do that? How do you answer that question? I don't know what to say. I mean, it's up to people. Do you mean what's going to be on my tombstone?
Been almost 30 albums and 47 years. Yeah.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
People have got out of jail before that.
I know, it's kind of a life sentence.
Is it easier to work with live than it is in the studio?
I think it's the same thing. It had to be in the early days. It was the only guitar I had.
Well, I did a guest appearance with Motorhead a few years back in Sweden Rock, where I played Killed by Death.
Did you kill anybody with it?
No, not yet.
Wanted to be an airline pilot. 3 weeks, that dream faded away, you know, and now I want to have a guitar, I want to be, you know, playing like Israelis. So I went and there was a Black Les Paul made in Japan, of course, back in those days. 575 Danish krones, that's what I had. Say, hey, you know, I want that guitar.
Chicks really like guys when they play a guitar. They dig it, man.
Yeah, I hadn't noticed.
I think Michael Schenker is one of the greatest rock guitarists of all time. That's the main reason I chose the Flying V, Michael Schenker.